Holy Gospel according to John, the 2nd chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On the 3rd day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine when the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and the disciples believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
If you ever need some driving directions, I can tell you, you just need to ask Charlotte. She has a really good knack for knowing just where we need to go, and she can really do this only after going to a place only a time or two. Driving to Sedalia the other day, we were about halfway out Route 52 when she announced from the back seat, "Now before you get to the bridge in a couple miles, make sure you turn right. Okay, Daddy?" "Yes, dear." She will even inform me of what lane I need to be in, which cars I should or should not pass, and whether or not I'm going too fast. Truly backseat driving at its best. There really can be no surprises at this point either, because she does know what's going on and where we should be going. I hadn't told them about the pizza we were going to be picking up along the way, so when I changed lanes to make that turn, "Where are we going? Why aren't we going straight? This lane ends, Daddy. Don't you see those signs up there?" "Yes, dear. We're picking up pizza for lunch, but I don't want pizza." Well, that's a whole other story. For the longest time, this sense of direction simply came from paying attention, from remembering where and when we needed to turn, and keeping all those details separated for the different places that we needed to go. More recently, though, with her growing ability to read, she now announces to me just about every sign that she can read. "Sedalia, turn right." "Okay." "Road work ahead." "Daddy, what are they doing?" "I don't know." "Sedalia, 16 more miles. That'll take forever." Sure feels like it. She knows that all these signs contain important information. They point us to where to go, and they can alert us to what is ahead and when we might expect it. So today is the second Sunday after the Epiphany, which traditionally recognizes the third of 3 events that show us who Jesus is. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but on the day of Epiphany, the wise men follow the star to that place where Jesus lies with his parents, and they bow down and worship, showing us his royal identity. The next event, last week, was recognizing Jesus' baptism, in which the Spirit descends upon him and God's voice announces that this is God's own Son. Today announces that third event that shows us this epiphany of who Jesus is, an event that reveals this manifestation of how Jesus embodies God's own self. And it's this event that I often call the miracle at Cana, where Jesus turns water into wine at this wedding. But when I make that announcement and that declaration, I often forget that I'm wrong in calling it that. But let me back up a little bit, because we need to remember that today's gospel reading comes from the Gospel of John, right? And if you've ever compared those four gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you know that John is very different from all the other three. At the beginning of each one, Matthew begins with this long genealogy before getting into that birth story. Luke brings us prophesying voices about Jesus, and John follows with hymns of praise for what God is doing in the birth of Jesus. Mark begins with John the Baptizer's prophecy, Jesus' baptism, and then jumps right into Jesus' ministry. But John's gospel, on the other hand, starts with this big cosmic announcement that Jesus, the Word, has been since the beginning. And that Jesus, the Word, is with God. And that Jesus, the Word, is God. John is up to something different than these other three Gospels, which is important for us to remember, especially when a story from that Gospel just shows up in the middle of a bunch of other stories from the other Gospels, like it does today. So when I think about and refer to what Jesus does as at this Canaan wedding in turning water into wine as a miracle, technically I'm wrong. Because John never calls it a miracle. John calls this and all the other things that Jesus does a sign. Because for John in this gospel, while the thing that Jesus does is important and is often miraculous, what's more important for him is what that thing points to. And as a sign, what it usually points to is what God is doing and what we need to look out for and be aware of along the way, and ultimately where we're going. You may remember that a wedding in Cana in those days was a big deal. It was a feast that would have lasted for days on end. The hospitality that was shown by the host had to be top-notch, or else it would have been a huge embarrassment and something that would not have been lived down for years, if not generations. So the fact that the wine did run out at this wedding, well, there was going to be a problem. But as we hear, Jesus saw what the problem was. He quickly stepped in to save the day, and the party went on. Well, it wasn't quite that straightforward, right? Because as we hear in the story, it wasn't Jesus who noticed the dilemma. It was Jesus' mother, Mary, who notices and calls Jesus to action. Except she's never named in the Gospel of John. She's only called the mother of Jesus. So I've often been curious as to how this interaction between them took place. I wonder about the way the mother of Jesus brought this to his attention. Was she filled with anxiety on behalf of the wedding host? You know, we're never told who this wedding is for. Was it a relative? Was it a friend? Was it someone she had this deep respect for? Did she come running up to Jesus, frantically begging him to fix the problem so these hosts wouldn't have to face the shame of this lack of hospitality? Or was she just mixed into the crowd? One of the many, many guests who had been invited like Jesus and his disciples were. Maybe it was no skin off her back if the party had to end early and everyone went home disappointed. But maybe in the midst of that, she saw what was going on and thought, this is Jesus' opportunity. And she calmly approaches him, she pulls him aside, and in that way that parents often or sometimes do with their adult children, offered him this information of what was going on, see what would happen. But at first he doesn't do anything with it, you know. Woman, what concern of this is this to you and me? My hour has not yet come. I think I've also mentioned this in the past, but the way this statement falls on our ears is not how it would have been meant in those ancient days. Jesus was not being disrespectful to her face in that woman kind of a sense, as I often hear it. Jesus' statement was more of a way to separate himself from her role as his earthly mother, and that his hour is dictated more by his inner call from God rather than some human authority. So then, as children sometimes do, Jesus eventually comes around and does what his mother suggests. And he sees this opportunity as one that could point to what God is doing. And so after Mary tells these servants to do whatever he tells you, he tells them to fill the jugs. He turns it into this high-quality wine. The first sign or miracle of many that he does that shows the abundant generosity of God. There's another detail surrounding this sign, one that I confess never catches my attention. And that's how the gospel writer begins this story, by telling us that this wedding happened on the third day. Since we know the rest of Jesus' story, what else is there in his story that we know happens with him on the third day? Anyone? Resurrection. We confess in our creed, right? On the third day, he rose again. After Jesus' death and burial, on the third day, he is resurrected. This sign in John's gospel of abundance and joy and love shown at this wedding, we can almost see that as a foreshadowing of the abundance and joy and love that is shown to all the world in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Plus then, if we go back to the beginning of the gospel and start counting from there, which I had to do, this third day is actually the seventh day for after Jesus shows up on the scene with John, which again, in the whole picture, the big picture of this points to the completion that this sign ultimately brings about. All of this points to the God who provides us with abundant life. This miraculous sign from Jesus allows the party to continue. He turns people's shame into joy and their worry into wonder. I wonder then if we can be as bold as Mary, the mother of Jesus. Her simple statement to him, "They have no wine," as simple as it is, was a profound act of noticing, especially as she took the next step in lifting her worries to a God who listens. We all see the scarcity and the brokenness and the hopelessness in our lives and in our world all around us. And we often think we can't do anything about it. But here, Mary shows us that voicing these concerns to God can result in amazing abundance. It is amazing to me how something that seems so trivial as making sure the refreshments at a party don't run out, something as simple as that can point us to the incredible life and generosity, the incredible goodness and love that we find in God through the work of Jesus Christ. Amen.